We're here at the 2024 Budapest Forum, and with me now is Zsuzsanna Végh, Programme Officer at the German Marshall Fund. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with a really simple question. Is there any argument that Hungary is upholding a functioning democracy?
Well, I think there are many arguments against. Ever since Prime Minister Orbán came into power in 2010, his government has systematically undermined the democratic institutions, removed checks and balances that would have held the executive accountable, and by today I think we cannot talk about Hungary as a functioning liberal democracy. In fact, I would argue that what we see is a hybrid regime. Maybe we can go as far as saying that Hungary has turned into an electoral autocracy where the facade of democracy is still in place, but the functioning of the regime is not democratic at all.
So when it comes to Hungary's role in the EU, is it an autocratic state as a member of the EU?
It is a state that no longer meets the criteria once it had to meet to join the European Union, namely to be a functioning democracy. As I said, the regime is fundamentally not democratic anymore, and that is also seen in some resolutions of the European Parliament, which did label the Hungarian state an electoral autocracy, and also we see various procedure steps taken against the Hungarian government, underlining that there are systemic challenges to the functioning of a democratic state. There are serious cases of corruption that the European Commission has tried to address with the government. There are shortcomings of the functioning of the judiciary, which again would be a check on the government, on the executive. So ultimately, there is an argument to be made that by now the Hungarian state is, if not an autocracy as such, although some would argue, it is very much on the path of autocratization.
So if Hungary was not a member of the EU right now, are you saying they wouldn't make it in? Exactly.
I'm saying that. Hungary today would not meet the first Copenhagen criteria of being a democratic state.
And yet at the moment, because of the way that the EU Council presidency works, Hungary holds the rotating presidency. Do you think that anything good can come out of this presidency, or has come out of this presidency?
So far not. So far not much good has come out of it. Ultimately, the government has been using the occasion of holding the rotating presidency of the EU as a platform to advocate for its own very Eurosceptic sovereignist positions, and it has also demonstrated a clear lack of consideration and even in certain cases cooperation that would enable the European Union to function as a community of member states based on shared values. The Hungarian government has been abusing its veto powers over the past years, and it continues to follow that policy. It continues to challenge the EU institutions, the judgment of the European Court of Justice. So ultimately, I think this is an occasion that may highlight the nature of how the Hungarian government functions, but it is undermining the stance and the credibility of the European Union.
One of the first moves that Viktor Orbán did was go to Moscow and meet with Vladimir Putin. Is there a diplomatic argument that that can be a good thing, that at a time where Russia is invading Ukraine and the world wants peace, is there an argument that trying to bridge that gap with Vladimir Putin is a good thing, or do you think peace with Putin is not possible?
I think Prime Minister Orban is not the person to mediate in this situation. His strong ties with the regime in Moscow and his frequent confrontations with the leadership in Ukraine over the past years really undermine the position of a credible mediator. I do not see any political diplomatic justification for that trip at the very beginning of the Hungarian EU presidency, and I also think that using the logos which he did on this trip of the Hungarian EU presidency was an overstep. In that position, he couldn't have represented the EU, and yet he gave the appearance. But we should not forget that the European Union condemns the aggression of Russia. In principle, the Hungarian government says so too, but its continued cooperation with the aggressor state sends a very different message.
Why is someone like Viktor Orban so keen to have a strong relationship with Putin and be so cozy with Vladimir Putin?
I think it goes back to multiple reasons. On the one hand, Hungary has a strong dependence on Russian gas and oil, which was the case generally in Central and Eastern Europe, but we have not particularly seen major steps from the Hungarian government to move away from that dependency over the past decade. Also, when the Orban government took office back in 2010, gradually it started to move towards a foreign policy that tried to broaden Hungary's room for maneuver in international relations and started a policy of Eastern opening in the hopes that Hungary can be a bridge between East and West. It can build new alliances, but at the same time, what the government disregarded is that it is not in between two worlds, if you will, but it is a member of the EU, it is a member of NATO, yet it behaves as if it is outside of those organizations, as if it's not bound by the commitments to those organizations, and pursues a balancing act. Ultimately, I think this Eastern opening policy that led to deepening ties with Russia, and here we can think of the commitment to build new reactors of the Paks nuclear power plant, which is entirely dependent both on Russian technology and also on Russian loans, the details of which are intransparent. It really put Hungary on a pet dependency. And I do not think that this is a relationship that is of equals and that the Hungarian government can control. Ultimately, I think it has been rather putting Hungary in a much weaker position than Orban originally would have maybe liked to.
And you mentioned there that Hungary needs to know that it is part of the European Union. That's perhaps never been clearer than when Viktor Orban announced plans to expand this Schengen zone to bring Belarusians and Russians into Hungary, or to allow them in, to make those exemptions, the national card scheme for the same purpose. And of course, once they enter the Schengen zone, they can move freely. How concerning is that kind of a move? And do you feel like it puts the rest of the European Union at risk?
I think it is concerning in the current context. So what you mentioned, this national card, this is an instrument which facilitates foreigners to receive essentially work permits in Hungary. It does not require a justification from the employer. It can be accessed much easier than when a guest worker undergoes the standard procedures. There are no clear caps on how many nationals of the given country can receive this card, and it essentially facilitates the process of bringing in workers from specific countries. Now, this is not only an option for Russia and Belarus. The national card was available before to Ukrainian and Serbian citizens, and with the expansion of this, let's call it an instrument, in the summer, also it was made an available option to other countries in the Western Balkans and also Moldova, for example. Now, several of these countries, apart from Russia and Belarus, are actually candidates for EU membership. So we could even make the argument that easing the process of entering, for the citizens to enter the EU labor market is even justified. It can even be interpreted as a friendly move towards neighboring countries who one day want to join the European Union. This is not so with Russia and Belarus. Now, one more thing about this program is that it does not specify which sectors are open for such workers. That's different from the program of guest workers in general, and it's also not clear where and for what functions we would need workers from Russia and Belarus. This is seen as a friendly move towards these countries on the one hand, but also a potential risk in the context where the European Union considers these countries as a potential threat. And in light of Russia's aggression in Ukraine, it's an even worse look. So, given that there is knowledge about extensive spying activities from Russia in the region, opening up this fairly uncontrolled process by an actor, the Hungarian government, that is anyhow not seen as a benign actor, a good ally in the European Union, very justly raises concerns among the allies. You mentioned the Schengen zone. Precisely. We can expect that people who receive this card can freely move in the European Union. This increases the risks of spying, and that is precisely what our allies are worried about, and what the Hungarian government does not manage to disperse and justify at the moment.
And when it comes to the migration law, the EU has announced that Hungary will be deducted 200 million euros in payments for breaching that law. Does Viktor Orban even take notice of a bill like that not coming through, or some money like that not being deposited, I guess, into the Hungarian bank account? Or is that something that just sort of bypasses him completely because it's such a small amount?
It's not a small amount. And it's also an important symbolic step. It's not a small amount, and in fact, what really impacts the Hungarian government to date is the freezing of EU funds that the Hungarian government would otherwise receive to use for the development of the country. After the launch of the so-called rule of law conditionality procedure, that was the first time when we really have seen steps by the Hungarian government to start to remedy, although very partially, criticisms that the European Commission voiced regarding judiciary independence in the country. So financial sanctions, if you will, do seem to have more of an impact than just calling out the Hungarian government on its actions that undermine the EU legislation. And ultimately, this fine that the Hungarian government decided not to pay, which was put on it because of breach of asylum legislation, is also either going to be paid, which it will not be, or deducted from funds that Hungary would otherwise receive. Now, ultimately, eventually, if this continues, the Hungarian government will likely need to look for other sources of financial support. And just this summer, we have learned that the Hungarian government has taken a very significantly sized Chinese loan, yet again, the details and conditions of which we do not know. So this may again create some sort of dependencies that the Hungarian government is navigating the country into.
And we will watch Hungary certainly with interest. Zsuzsanna Végh, a Programme Officer at the German Marshall Fund, thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for watching this interview from the 2024 Budapest Forum here on TVP World. Do stay with us. I'm Aaron Darman. Goodbye for now.